Jeff King, a lot to break down today about your 2025 Global Persecution Index. Now, before we get into the results and the report, with International Christian Concern, you put this report out. It's 116 pages, a lot of content. For those who don't know, what is the purpose of the Global Persecution Index?
Yeah, well, Billy, thanks for asking it. Global persecution is a complicated subject. I've been doing it for forever, but I realize when I talk to decision makers on Capitol Hill or journalists, a journalist has to cover so much, right? And so then to, try to become an expert on persecution is very hard. It takes a long time. So we produce the report. So kind of those decision makers or journalists can go fast forward and quickly grasp a very complex issue and understand the where and the why and the how of persecution.
Yeah, and this is, as you said, very complex. You and I have spoken many times. I mean, you could spend hours talking about one particular country even and what is going on inside that country. And in this report, you're looking all across the globe, every corner of the globe at what is going on. How did you collect the data? What is that process like before we get into what you found?
Yeah, so we have staff all over the world, first of all. So they're feeding us back news of what's going on in their countries and what are the trends and what are the incidents and what really is persecution and what's something else. And then we've got a team of fellows too, and these are academics and different people. And then we've got our regular staff, and they're analyzing the news and taking in from staff around the world and posting news all the time. So we're constantly monitoring and watching and to see what's happening where, because we have to respond. We have to get in there and aid victims. So our ear is always to the ground, and then we're outputting it in news, and then the academics are writing reports. And then at the end of the year, we just kind of pull all that together and do a very deep dive and do a survey and say, hey, what's the cream of the crop? Although it's not cream at all, right? But what are the top issues? And so we just kind of parse it that way.
From a 30,000 foot view, people will ask the question, okay, well, when you live in America, especially, it's 2025 now. How could these horrific things really be happening? How many of them are really going on? What would you say to those who would say, what are the trends looking like around the world? Are things getting better? Are they getting worse when it comes to persecution?
Yeah, I'd say I think they just continue to get worse. It's been a slow burn worse for a very long time. Just take the biggest country and the biggest group of people that are persecuted around the world. Just look at China. So you've got a massive, massive number of Christians. And, starting with the rise of President Xi, he just went into Mao mode and major crackdown on Christians. So that continues. That hasn't let up. But that's been going on for a few years. But then more recently, we've got Syria. And the group that took over a huge swath of Syria very quickly is al-qaeda and ISIS. That's who these guys are. They're called HTS, but that's just, they did a name change. They did a rebranding, as it were. And these guys are the worst of the worst. Now, they're very politically savvy. They're very journalism savvy. They're advised by Turkey's intel people. And so, when they get on camera, it's like, we are not going to have a problem with Christians. My gosh, we're modern, we're tolerant. And it's like, oh my gosh, all you have to do is understand who these players are and what their past is. And the leopard doesn't change a spot. So that's Syria. You've also got Ukraine. Russia destroyed hundreds of churches, Ukrainian churches, and heritage sites. And so that was very disturbing. And then you've got all the usual places like India and Egypt and just all over the world, North Korea, Nigeria. It's absolutely horrible situation, but it just goes on and on. It's not necessarily new, but it's terrible.
Well, and Nigeria is where the bulk of persecution unfolds against Christians, right? I don't know if you want to break that down or not. We've talked about this in the past, but I think it's important. When you look at overall across the globe, the percentage of Christians killed, the majority, if I'm not mistaken, are in Nigeria.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we've, as you said, we've talked and analyzed this a lot. And we would say, on the journalism side of persecution, people will always think of North Korea as the worst, and it is absolutely terrible. You don't get worst in any country in terms of control and monitoring and surveillance and punishment than North Korea. But the masses of deaths are happening in Nigeria. And this is happening with the help of the Nigerian government. There's an Islamic deep state within. This is absolutely part of a larger project. It's a slow-moving genocide. It's a stealth jihad. And the people behind it, the tribe of Fulanis, in the ruling class as well as in the deep state, they are a much bigger problem. So we see it coming to a head in Nigeria, but there is a huge swath of Africa that is taken over by radical Islam. And the only thing that makes it a little confusing for people, it's also complicated because they'd say, well, it's ISIS or, al-qaeda or some other splinter group, and people get lost in the alphabet soup. But this is the tribe of Fulanis. It runs from east to the west coast of Africa in the Sahel, and they have gained a massive control of a massive area, and they're trying to resurrect a caliphate, which they had in the 1800s, I think it was. So that's really diving deep, but that is a major happening in the last year. It's been building for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on around the globe. When you were mentioning, you mentioned China at first, then North Korea, obviously Nigeria. When you look at the report and the findings, if somebody said to you, because all these different things, there's different forms of persecution, right? So there's deadly persecution where you're being killed. Yep. There's persecution where you're losing your job, where your family's disowning you, where the government's going after you, where local residents are going after you. There's so many different layers. What would you say? And I want people to go and read the reports. They can see all of the details in all of these countries. Are the top two worst countries to be a Christian right now across the globe?
Yeah, I would say we named them. It's Nigeria and it's North Korea. So we just talked about Nigeria, although if people aren't familiar, they don't know the day-to-day. And that means you're a Christian farmer, you're a Christian villager, and one night the Fulani terrorists, the Islamic terrorists come in with guns, with machetes, and they shoot, and they maim, and they slice, and they drive you off the land. And if you decide to come back, they'll attack you again. So massive numbers of attacks. It's out in the bush. And it never stops. And strangely, Billy, you get the irony. The government can never seem to chase these perpetrators or go after them. All they do, they play a game with the U.S. It's like, gosh, it's so hard. It's guerrilla warfare. It's so hard to find these guys. We need military aid. And I'm flabbergasted that Washington responds. I'm often flabbergasted by Washington that they respond, and then we provide military aid to them. And it's like, my gosh. So again, a massive stealth jihad, a massive land grab, and the Christians are in control of the agrarian belt of Nigeria. So they are, and that's in the middle. And so they used to be in the north, and they were just marching down and taking control. And there's millions of Christian farmers that have been displaced. 3+ million Christian farmers have been driven off their lands. So that's Nigeria. That's the thumbnail. And then you've got North Korea. And, the Kim regime, the original Kim regime started in the 50s. They took over and completely Marxist. And they created a system to absolutely mimic Christianity. So, the leader of the country, whoever that is, it was a father, son, and grandson. Now we're at the grandson level of the same family. And he's portrayed as a godlike figure. You have Sunday gatherings where communities gather together and they confess their errors in terms of the revolution, their sins, as it were. And then they study the books of the great leader. And so, again, very much like Christianity. And they're constantly being told, the propaganda is that they live in a utopia and the best country on earth. And, the United States is the worst place on earth. And so this is what people are growing up in. And then if anybody derails that narrative, they are the highest level of enemy to the state. And of course, that's Christians. So Christians don't bow to the state. We don't want to cause trouble, but our ultimate king is the King of Heaven. And so that is extremely destabilizing, extremely threatening to the regime because they want to control the people through religion. It's the religion of Marxism and the state and the Kim regime. But nonetheless, so if you're a Christian, a real Christian, and you get caught, so that you can make a distinction between you went over to China and found a Bible, pretty serious offense. But if they just found that someone gave you a Bible and you're not really interested and you haven't read it, that only gets you in so much trouble. If you're a real Christian, you're either killed right away or you're sent to a gulag, a massive, massive prison camp. And Billy, as you know, these prison camps, some of them are the size of Washington, D.C. And they're basically slow extermination chambers. So the state says, look, we didn't kill them. They died. They had health problems or whatever. Well, in these camps, you die of starvation, malnutrition, etc. And if you're sent there, if you're not killed right away and you're sent there, you're also sent with your children, and your parents go too. Wow. So ongoing complete attempt to annihilate the virus, as they see it, of Christianity.
You know, it's so evil. I mean, you look at even China and the reports that that the Chinese Communist Party has tried to essentially rewrite the Bible, some of the stories that they've changed in the Bible. And you have one approved version of the Bible there, right? So, that's very concerning and evil. And you see this sort of thing happen all over the globe. I have to ask you, though, in particular, and I know this is a tricky question, so, but I think it's an important one to ask, because during Trump's first term, Nigeria was placed on the countries of particular concern list and was then removed by the Biden administration. And that list carried with it some weight, some pressure on the government of Nigeria. That removal also, I would imagine, sent a message that was potentially problematic. What impact, if any, do you think Trump's return to the White House could have on persecution more broadly around the globe, but in particular, Nigeria?
Well, he is a politician. He's not a traditional politician, but he knows where his bread is buttered. And the Christian community is a major platform of his support. So that's the good news. So I'm sure he's going to be active on the subject. He's going to be, it's going to have his attention. The only thing is, in the last administration, he really had a dream team set up. And I'm not sure that was really his doing. He put the right guy overstate, and that guy, and the right vice president, and then the right leader of the religious freedom division within the State Department. And these guys were just amazing. And it was really a renaissance, not a renaissance. It was the golden age of religious freedom, global religious freedom, in terms of the United States doing really what we were called to do. We are a beacon of freedom. We're, far from perfect. But what was created in our country was so different from what existed for all of time. You look back at history, look at all of history, and mankind is ruled by a group of oligarchs or a dictator, a king, and everyone else is some kind of slave or semi-slave. That's all of history. And so what happened in our country? We said, no, the law is king. The people are king. And the government is a servant to the people. And so we have always been a beacon of hope, a beacon of freedom to the world. That's a big part of why the masses come here. There's the economics of who we are, that you can rise, but there's also, they have freedom. When they come here, it's intoxicating. They say they can think. So that's what we should be doing. We should be nailing these countries and explaining to the world, and use the bully pulpit to say, this is who these guys are. They're doing wrong. You've got to shape up. And that's the good thing about Trump. He's, on the one hand, he's abrasive, but he will tell the truth. And that's like so many people. They want to send him to Washington because he'll tell the truth. Yeah. Instead of going along with the constant stream of lies about what's going on in different countries. So I'm hopeful, but his last administration had a dream team.
And you hope that you have that same team of people who care about the issue, who know how to handle the issue, who aren't going to just placate. Yeah, I think there's a fear that comes with uncertainty around Trump sometimes too, that maybe some of these leaders will think twice about some of this. I don't know, and we'll have to wait and see if Nigeria returns to the list of countries of particular concern list. I don't know what will happen there, but At the end of the day, this report, the 2025 Global Persecution Index, incredibly important. Where can people go if they want to get a copy of it, if they want to read it?
Yeah, it's persecution.org/GPI, or you can just go to persecution.org and go up to the top and look at reports. And then also get our newsletter. So our newsletter is a magazine. It's about persecution. I think that's the most important thing. The people, in this day and age, there's so much coming at you. You're not going to be aware unless there's information being shown to you what's going on with your brother and sister. So sign up for our magazine called Persecution.
Well, I so appreciate you breaking it down. We have a lot to pray for the persecuted church around the world, and I appreciate the work you're doing to highlight everything that people are going through. And that, I think, again, inspires us all to think deeply about our brothers and sisters in Christ and to be praying for them. Thank you for your time today.
So good to be with you, Billy. Thank you.